Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within 2, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade / keys walkthrough, and this is Chapter 1, Into the Flame, and Chapter 2, Something Not Quite Right. And the only thing we're doing in Chapter 1 is reliving the flashback moment where Sebastian thought Lily was killed by the fire, and now we're going to skip directly to Chapter 2. And to everyone who hates the Evil Within 2 and calls it a game that is not even as scary as the first Evil Within, I just want to say, you people don't understand survival horror, and you guys don't understand how to judge survival horror objectively. I mean, look at this beginning sequence. The first time I experienced this whole moment of Chapter 2, and I got to really take in the atmosphere and just the kind of settings they were putting you in with the Evil Within 2, I was like, oh my god, this is breathtaking. This game looks so amazing. The lighting is phenomenal. The set pieces that they put you in are really, really nice. And it just feels like a very scary game. Like, atmospherically, this game does survival horror really well. And you might have noticed with the very first video that I put out for this walkthrough, it was a no commentated version, and I included the cutscenes, and I included me exploring the area a little bit. That's because I have so much respect for the survival horror in this game, and I just like all the characters, I like just everything that occurs within this game so much, that I just felt it would be a sin to not include a separate version of the walkthrough that just included all those moments. Much like what Lightning Fidelis was doing with his walkthrough. So I decided to take a cue from Lightning and do a no commentated version of this game, and then also put in a separate commentated version that cuts out all the moments except for the parts that have gameplay in it. But yeah, just look at this area. Look how beautiful this area looks. And I know a lot of people complain about the environments on this game, but they're not factoring in the lore aspect when it comes to judging the environments on this game. Just because this game doesn't feature a lot more environments like the first Evil Within did, does not mean it's a bad game. In fact, there's a lot of justification as to why there aren't a lot of environments. Like, this is a completely stable STEM system, because Lily is the core of the system, and since Lily's only been missing within the system for at least a week, it has not allowed the likes of Stefano and Theodore to fill in the voids of STEM with their own worlds. That's just not enough time for them to fill in all that void whatsoever. And that's why you don't see a lot of environments, but the environments that are present, they feel so detailed and they have character. And the fact that other people just cannot see that is just a testament to how people are terrible at judging survival horror games. And that's what you get with people who judge the older Resident Evil games as being better survival horror games than the newer Resident Evil games. But we're now being introduced to the stealth system of this game. So, the stealth system in Evil Within 2 has received an overhaul. So, Sebastian now has the ability to take cover, and as you saw right there, that is the corner transition mechanic, so that allows you to transition around corners. You have to hold the button in order to do it. Seems a little strange, but you'll get used to it. And then you might have noticed that while I was moving the camera around, you might have seen an arrow near the cover spaces I was looking at. That means that Sebastian can transition into that piece of cover if you press the circle button. You obviously don't want to do it in this case, because if Stefano sees you, he'll kill you instantly. But you just have so many different options at your disposal when it comes to approaching the stealth on this game. And they've made some improvements to mechanics that existed in the first Evil Within. Like, for instance, with the last known position mechanic. In the first Evil Within, the last known position mechanic was good, but the enemies still knew where you were for a couple of seconds. So you had to really make sure you were far enough away from an enemy so that they wouldn't just detect you very quickly. Well, on this game, they've made it so that the moment you break line of sight, the enemies don't know where you are. So this gives you such a great advantage when it comes to dealing with the enemies. You can get a lot of this game done stealthily. And this game, the developers did say that they were trying to put less emphasis on forced combat encounters, and it's definitely true. Compared to the first Evil Within, there aren't that many forced combat encounters in this game. In fact, the very first time you engage in a forced combat encounter is on Chapter 5 when you have to fight Obscura. All the combat encounters before that, you can just completely avoid the enemies or just not deal with them. I mean, there is that one combat encounter in Chapter 4 that's pretty difficult where you have all of the Haunted swarming you as you're waiting for the lockdown to be lifted. But I wouldn't really call that a forced combat encounter because you don't have to kill the enemies. I mean, it takes a little bit longer to get the sequence done if you're not killing all the enemies. But you can save your ammo very easily. And on the topic of ammunition, they've changed the way the ammo crafting works now in this game. So, if you remember back in the first Evil Within, there was an ammunition crafting system, and it allowed you to use trap parts that you obtained via disarming traps or by finding trap parts within the environment to craft crossbow bolts for the Agony crossbow. and that was the only weapon that allowed ammunition crafting. Every other weapon did not receive the same treatment. Well, on this game, they've made it so that you can now craft ammunition for each of your weapons, and they've removed the trap parts entirely. Instead, what they have as a replacement for the trap part system is the gunpowder system. So, gunpowder by itself can be used to make bullets for your guns. When it comes to the Warden crossbow, as it's called on this game, you have to obtain gunpowder and a specific type of part in order to make a specific type of crossbow bolt. So for instance, with the explosive bolts, you need gunpowder and you also need nails. You can also find the individual bolts within the environment, but they aren't so prevalent. In fact, one thing that I've noticed about this game compared to the first Evil Within is that ammunition itself is not that prevalent. It's the actual crafting ingredients that are far more prevalent than the ammunition type itself. And that's the game's way of telling you that it wants you to have a little bit more flexibility with the kind of ammo that you want to make. And I really like that. I always like it when the game gives you the ability to create your own type of ammo. And, you know, that's what made, like, Resident Evil 3, for instance, a very interesting game to experiment with, because of the gunpowder system. And the gunpowder system in Resident Evil 3 allowed you to really experiment with the kind of weapons that you wanted to have ammunition for. And we're being chased by the Guardian right now. And you gotta be very careful with this vent sequence coming up, especially when you're playing on New Game Plus and you've upgraded your crouch speed. Because there's going to be a moment where the Guardian will slice through the vent, and you think it's just there for cinematic effect, but it actually isn't. It actually does damage to you. And if you move too fast before this little moment where Sebastian stumbles backwards, you won't have enough time to get away before the boss hits you. Not that it matters anyway, since, of course, this is a no-upgrade walkthrough, and I never like doing New Game Plus, because I think New Game Plus in games nowadays just is very boring. Unless you're talking about the Batman Arkham series, where the difficulty level of the game actually increases, and then the enemy arrangements are different to accommodate for the fact that you have all the gadgets at the very beginning. For the most part, New Game Plus is literally just you going through the game with no kind of changes whatsoever, aside from the fact that you have all the weapons at the beginning. And there's just no incentive whatsoever to engage in New Game Plus if you're the kind of hardcore gamer that I am, where you play on nothing but the hardest difficulty, and you occasionally decide to put in these kind of restrictions like what I'm doing in this walkthrough in order to provide more of a challenge and to defy people's expectations, while still making the game look like it's playable and it actually showcases the full potential of the game. And, you know, that's why I was never really fond of the idea of doing a handgun/consumable only run of the first Evil Within, because it really tore that game apart, and it did not do that game justice whatsoever. That was definitely one of the main reasons why I had to do a commentated walkthrough of the first Evil Within on Akumu difficulty with no upgrade/keys to actually show the game at its best. And now I'm going to be doing the same with the Evil Within 2. It's hard to believe it's taken me until now to actually do a walkthrough of the Evil Within 2. I mean, I've done so many live streams of this game on Akumu difficulty, and originally Akumu difficulty wasn't even a thing on the Evil Within 2. Instead, what we had for a harder difficulty was classic difficulty. And you might be wondering why I didn't base my walkthrough around classic difficulty. Well, it's because classic difficulty is one of the laziest difficulties ever in the Evil Within series. It's up there with Kuriyami difficulty from the Kidman DLCs. Because all Kuriyami difficulty was in the Kidman DLCs was just survivor difficulty with no lights whatsoever. Everything else was the same. So all you were doing was just playing survivor difficulty with absolutely no kind of lighting whatsoever. Everything was just in darkness. It impacted the cutscenes. It made a game that looked really impressive look just ugly. And you didn't get to appreciate anything when it came to the aesthetics of the first Evil Within whatsoever. And classic difficulty does more than that, but it couldn't have been more archaic in how it was designed and just not properly thought through. What classic difficulty does is it limits your saves. You are only allowed to save 7 times throughout the full game, and all autosaves are completely disabled. And that's all you really need to know about classic difficulty. I mean, the only other thing that classic difficulty does is it gives the enemies survivor difficulty health, but they do nightmare difficulty damage. So, objectively, Akumu difficulty, a difficulty where the enemies have a lot more health than on survivor difficulty, and they kill you instantly, is a harder difficulty than classic difficulty. So where is the incentive to do that difficulty mode? And that's not even mentioning the fact that, while this game is optimized a lot better than the first Evil Within, since I'm playing the game at an unlocked frame rate, and the game just looks a lot nicer, it still suffers from moments where it just randomly crashes for no reason. And the crashes that occur within the Evil Within 2 happen mainly around Chapter 7, Chapter 13, and Chapter 14. And then there are a couple of rare moments where crashes can occur during the other chapters. So why the heck would the developers design a difficulty that limits your saves and gets rid of all autosaves when the game crashes like it does? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and if a crash does occur, all of the progress that you have been working towards is completely lost, and you have to pick up all the items again, kill the same enemies, and then do whatever you were doing, watch all of the cutscenes and skip them, and it just feels like such a waste of time. Like, it completely destroys all enjoyment of this game. And the most annoying thing is they didn't even model it after Resident Evil 1. They instead modeled it after Dead Space 2. In Resident Evil 1, you had to find ink ribbons in order to save, and they were littered throughout the environment. On Dead Space 2, the saves were already predetermined for you. You could only save 3 times on Dead Space 2. And much like Classic difficulty on the Evil Within 2, Dead Space 2's Hardcore difficulty gave the enemies the exact same treatment when it came to their HP, where their HP was lower than on the actual highest difficulty, which was Zealot difficulty. That's pretty much all that a lack of checkpoints really does to a game. It forces the developers to make the game more manageable, so nowhere near as challenging. Akumu difficulty respects the challenge of the game by giving you checkpoints, and because of the fact that you have the checkpoints, the enemies are very lethal. But because of the fact that you have no checkpoints on Classic difficulty, the enemies are nowhere near as threatening as they are on Akumu difficulty. Based on the list of reasons I presented, it definitely makes less sense to do a walkthrough of this game on Classic difficulty, and more sense to do a walkthrough of this game on Akumu difficulty. Because more people are going to benefit in the long run, and they will have a better understanding of this game by the end of this walkthrough. And that is all I'm going to be saying on that particular tangent. I'm going to do a sneak kill on the final Lost over here, and once I get inside of this building, and I meet up with O'Neil, that will be the end of Chapter 2, and we will be moving on to the longest chapter of the game by far. Aside from Chapter 7, which is another lengthy chapter. So stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.